Thank you, Violet. Our next and final speaker of the day is Maui Solomon. And Maui is a barrister and Indigenous peoples advocate, specializing in cultural and intellectual property, environmental law, and treaty and Indigenous peoples' rights issues. He's also been a key legal and political advocate for the recognition of the customary and treaty rights and identity mediation and negotiation of his own Moriori people of Rekohu and Maori tribes in Aotearoa, New Zealand in general. So Maui's going to talk about managing cultural commodification for Indigenous communities.
Te whenua tapu o Musqueam, tēnā ko, e Victor i te rangatira, ngā mihi nui ki a ko e hoa, nō reira e koe mā koro mā, raurangatira, tēnā kōtou hokomena tai me rongo. So greetings. I just also want to say thank you to George and the IPinCH team, Brian especially, and Solon for making it possible for Susan and I to to attend this conference. And there are two extraordinary things about my presentation. One is, as Kim pointed out earlier, I'm the only male on this panel today. And what's even more extraordinary is that I get to have the last say. So I better get on with it. I'm going to talk today about three case study examples, the masi, the moko, and the momori. And if I can go back just briefly, I think what I have to say can be summarised in the title, Respect and Reciprocity. When it's all said and done, when you listen to Shannon, when you listen to Violet, and hopefully when you've listened to me, you'll know that what we're asking for is respect and reciprocity. It's not that complicated. My key argument is that whether it's a commercial or a non-commercial use of cultural images, the consent or approval of the kaitiaki, the traditional guardians, must be given. And that's whether or not an IP right is being sought. Now, of course, as we've heard today, and as we know, kaitiaki have differing views, have differing notions. Some will say yes, some will say no, some will say maybe, some will say bugger off. And that's their right. That's our right. That's our responsibility, actually. And that's something I want to say, is that Indigenous peoples put more emphasis on responsibilities and obligations than we do on rights. We must fulfill our obligations before we can exercise our rights, before we can take kai from the sea, before we can take a tree from the forest. We've got to ask permission. We've got to fulfill our obligation. So when we see, and when Violet, and I saw those images, it made me sick. That sacred, that tapu is being violated. Absolutely and totally. For a commercial purpose. So you are actually sucking out the juice of that taonga, of that treasure. You're making it into something that it's totally not. And we see this all the time. We see the trivialisation of taonga, taonga being treasures, treasures that are what we call taonga tuku iho, treasures passed down from the ancestors. So these images are invariably associated with living culture and identity. And that's really why I say consent approval is needed of those traditional knowledge holders. And I'd also say that the members of that cultural group aren't necessarily exempt from ethical requirements either. So I, as a moriori, can't just take the sacred symbol and use it for whatever purpose. I can't go and take a trademark out on it. I can't put it on a t-shirt and then sell those t-shirts without going through a proper process with my own people. So we're not exempt. Why should others be? And in the Pacific, these examples I'm talking about in the Pacific, reciprocity is key. The notion of koha, gift exchange. And it's not just the Pacific, it's actually all Indigenous communities and peoples as far as I know. I mean, the potlatch, that's not about taking, it's giving. When you go to the community for a wedding, it's the host that have to give the gifts. And it's the same with Moriori and Māori society. Your mana, your power, your prestige was not measured by what you got, it's what you gave. So reciprocity is fundamental. And if an image is going to be used for a commercial purpose, then there should be reciprocity. And it could be in the form of, I'd prefer to use the word koha or gift exchange. It could be in the form of some financial remuneration or benefit, or it might be something else completely different. It depends on the situation. Deirdre spoke about, in her experience on the Trademarks Committee, I didn't know she was going to talk about this, but tapu noa, the sacred and the non-sacred, and where do you draw the line? And that's very important. What's real, what's copycat? Is something a derivative of something that's authentic? And where down the spectrum? How far do you have to be from the original before you can say, oh, well, I don't need to bother to ask anyone, I'll just do it? You know, these are all very challenging questions. But if actually you go to the knowledge holders, if you go to the kaitiaki, if you take the time to find out who the kaitiaki is, the kaitiaki will tell you. And as I said, different kaitiaki will have different notions. For example, the proposed trademarking of the masi by Fiji Airways or Pacific Airlines, I'm not sure what they're calling themselves. You know, the community is saying, we don't mind you using it, hence the reciprocity, the koha, we'll koha that to you, but don't trademark it. Don't create a monopoly right on something that is our traditional knowledge. That are our sacred symbols. So here's the community who own this taonga in a sort of a Western sense, who are gifting it, but something's being taken from them because then whoever gets that trademark can say, well, we don't agree with you using those particular symbols anymore for whatever purposes you want to use. So there's no reciprocity in that situation. Ways to manage, we've heard lots of different ways. I was really intrigued by Kim's presentation about the licensing, in particular the labelling. That sounds like it's got a lot of potential. There's a whole heap of other mechanisms. Educative processes, I think, are important. Open sharing. I mean, we're considering, in my own tribal context, creating a derivative of our rako momori and just enabling people to use that within a certain ethical paradigm, as long as it's not being misused. So it's a reciprocity, it's a koha. Development of sui generis, or unique systems of law, is something that the Y262 claim was strong on. Unfortunately, despite the claim having gone for 20 years, we've finally got a 1,000-page report from the tribunal. 2 years down the track, we've heard nothing from the Crown. Not surprising. But Deirdre tells me a lot of work's been done in the background by the government. But there's been no consultation with any of the tribes who spent 20 years pursuing that claim. Where's the reciprocity in that? Of course, there are always going to be disputes, and there'll be different ways of resolving those disputes. I want to, the Waitangi Tribunal in the 262 claim has recommended a national commission be established if there's some dispute about probably a step forward from the Trademarks Advisory Committee. It's too complex to go into at this stage, but because I haven't got enough time, and I'd really like to share some of my own taonga and experiences with you. So, the rākau mōmori, these are sacred images that my ancestors carved onto living trees, and the trees were like a portal to the spiritual world. So when someone died, that image was carved onto a tree, and that way the person went home. Their spirit went home. And I'm not even haven't even started, and I've got 5 minutes left. So these images are very sacred to Moriori. We're developing our own brands around those images. Here's some nice derivatives, if you will. They're not exactly the same, but they're derivative of. So, because if you use exactly the same image, that's an image of an actual ancestor. We're developing our own font based on, like you see the little, the wording at the top of the H. That's like the hand of one of the tree carved figures. So we develop our own font. I want to talk briefly about Muckle. This is King Tāwhiu from the Waikato. And Muckle was a very sacred design. The right to wear Muckle had to be earned. It was specific to the wearer. It told a life story. It told tribal origins, whakapapa, achievements in battle, and it was literally a mark of one's culture and identity. Here's an authentic use in a modern day context of Muckle. Not authentic use, although you'd say, is it offensive? I mean, that's going to be an issue of debate. This one is offensive because of that tapu noa. So here you have a restaurant in Denmark promoting food by having a moko on someone's face. Food is noa, moko tapu, the two are supposed to be kept separate. So I'd imagine if someone applied for a trademark in that context, Deirdre, it would be a big no. Deirdre's talked about toi iho. I just briefly want to say trademarks, very limited protection, very limited protection. 98% of instances of misappropriation are through just people using them. They're not registering IP, they're just using it. And anyway, trademarks are costly to obtain, costly to enforce, and they don't protect images in the public domain. The Fiji Mase case, interesting. I probably don't have time to do this justice, but although Fiji Airways commissioned this Fijian artist to make these designs, her designs are based on traditional images that have been passed down. So not only are they trademarking the design being used on the aircraft, they've applied for 15 separate trademarks and all these other kesa, I believe they're called. I don't know what they're going to be used for, but there's been a huge public outcry from the people in Fiji, and you can read for yourself that they're saying, yes, use it, but just don't trademark it. I'm going to finish here. I went to Susan and I went to the Canucks San Jose game last night, and I bought a t-shirt, and then I looked closely at that t-shirt and noticed the Canucks brand, and I was wondering what process might have been gone through to use this brand, or is it belong to a band? I don't know. Someone might be able to answer that. Brand or band? So that's me, folks. Thanks for. I know it's late, so you can all go home.